Hello, my clever pilot. Hope you are doing great. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are flying to Lajes in Terceira, and I'll show you how to shoot an ILS approach in the Cessna 152. Over there we have a cloud base of 900 feet, so that will require our instrument flying. Since this is part of our Neofly career series, I'll be taking one passenger and some cargo in this flight. Today, here at Horta, we have somewhat of a cloud cover, so you already know the drill. We'll be taking the NOTMA departure, in this case the NOTMA 3 Echo departure, because we are taking off on runway 10. The only thing different is that we'll try to avoid this loop right after takeoff, and if we are visual, we will take it straight to the VOR and then fly straight to NOTMA. From there, and since Lajes doesn't have any standard arrivals, we'll be on our own navigation to the first fix for the ILS approach, which is Lacta. That sounds like Azorian themed. After that we try to land. If we cannot land because the weather is getting worse, we'll come back to Horta, where the forecast is reasonable, let's say. Well, that's our briefing. Any questions? Nice! Here we are once again in the cockpit of our Cessna 152 Delta Lima Sierra. Just to spare you from the inconvenience, I already set up all the radios for our departure, so let's get this baby started. Mixture full rich, throttle, lights, pump some fuel, and key to start. There she goes! We are ready to taxi here, so parking brake off, give it some throttle. And as I said, we'll be taking off on runway 10. We have winds from 110 at 7 knots, so basically straight ahead. Coming up onto runway 10. After takeoff, I'll try to maintain visual conditions so I don't have to do the whole procedure. But if we cannot maintain visual conditions, we have to turn right to intercept the radial 227 from the Hotel Tango NDB. If the engine fails, we have plenty of fields on the left side, on the coastline. So that's it. Something that I usually don't care, but probably I should if this was a real plane, is to verify that the oil pressure and temperature are in the green before takeoff. Usually during taxi, if the temperature outside is not too cold, the oil temperature comes to the green, but since here at Horta the taxi is too short for that, the oil temperature is still below the minimum recommended. So you just give it some throttle and wait until the engine warms up. That should be enough. We can release the parking brake and give it full throttle. .60 rotate, and she flies. Straight ahead you can see Monte da Guia, which is where both the VOR and the NDB are located. So, looks like we are about to lose our visual conditions. That means we have to follow the procedure and turn right. That's a shame. So to radial 227 from Hotel Tango it is. Or never mind, maybe we are lucky and I can go through this clearing in the clouds. Let's see. Looks like I was right. And you can see over there Mount Pico just peeking over the clouds. How beautiful. I slightly overshot the interception with the radial over here, so I'm coming back and I'm joining right away the VOR radial. We are visual above the clouds, so that's fine. We are coming close to the radial. I just overshot slightly to the left while recording beautiful footage for you. We are just reaching 10,000 feet. Let's set the airplane for cruise. So we should be just crossing Notma, the final fix on our departure. From now until Lacta, I don't have a defined route. So I know that to find Lacta, I have to be on a radial of 149 from the VOR and at a distance of 18 miles from the DME. I'm just changing the frequency here for the DME. In Lajes things get slightly tricky because we have DME and the VOR on separate frequencies. So I have to tune the DME on the Nav Radio 1 and the VOR on the Nav Radio 2. And I'm finding my way to Lacta just by fiddling with the VOR needle over here. Now let's talk about the ILS. It stands for Instrument Landing System, and it's used on precision approaches, and it works by using radio nav aids to guide the aircraft to the runway. An ILS requires two separate land-based components to work properly. There is the localizer that works somewhat like a VOR, but it only gives you one radial that lines with the runway usually. And there is the glide slope that gives vertical guidance and makes the aircraft follow a linear slope path to the runway. There are localizer only approaches where you don't have vertical guidance and you do what it's called step approach, where you use the distance to the localizer to know at what altitude you should be at the given time. As I said before, I have an initial fix for the approach that's called Lacta. To find it, here in Lajes we have a Vortac system. It's a VOR with a DME and a TACAN system at the same time. TACAN is basically the military version of a VOR DME system. The peculiar thing here is that the VOR and the DME are at separate locations and they have separate frequencies. So that makes things kind of difficult for the Cessna 152 because you can only use DME on your Nav1 radio. If you guys want, I can make a separate video explaining how that part of radio navigation works. In this case, the only thing you gotta know is that I have to manually follow the radial to the VOR and at the same time having the DME tuned on the radio 1. A quick rundown on what I have set on the nav radios. So on the nav one I have the frequency for the DME so I can get distance, and on standby I already have the frequency for the ILS approach. On the nav 2 I have the frequency for the VOR and I'm setting the frequency for the ILS approach as well, just so we can check on both radios how we are progressing. Something that I should add is that even though usually ILSs give you distance, in this case at Lajes we don't have distance from the ILS, we have distance from the DME or from the TAC. And that's further down the runway from where the localizer is. We are coming close to Lacta, that is at 18 miles from the DME and at the radio 329 from the VOR. Until we cross Lacta, we must keep ourselves at or above 4,000 feet. After that we do a progressive descent, so we can descend to 3,000 feet until we are at 12.5 miles. And from 12.5 miles onwards we can descend to 2,000 feet. At 12.5 is also the point where we should capture the localizer. And I'll show you how that works when we get there. As for the procedure, we should cross and capture the glide slope at 6.8 miles and 2,000 feet. We are approaching the 12.5 miles and I just swapped the frequencies on the nav2 radio. So what you see here is already the profile for the ILS and we are slightly to the left. We passed 12.5, we can start our descent to 2000. I'm still managing the heading manually, at least until we capture the glide slope, because I need distance reference on the nav1 radio, and that's the only one coupled to the autopilot. We are about to level at 2,000 feet here, so there's no really a reason to keep the DME tuned in. So I'll switch to the ILS frequency, so we can start to fine-tune our approach. Oh, and I just switched the autopilot to nav mode, so it follows the localizer on its own. You can see on the VOR localizer gauge, actually both of them, the vertical line is the localizer radial, so it indicates that we are slightly to the left of it, and the horizontal line is the glide slope indicator. So if it's above the middle of the gauge, it means that we are below the glide slope path. But we are leveling at 2000, so we are approaching the glide slope path from below. Usually that's the correct procedure, because if you approach the glide slope from above, usually you will end up too fast and overshooting the correct path. I was trying to arm the approach mode on the autopilot, since we are getting close to the glide slope path, but it doesn't want to do that. But we are getting close. Oh, there we go. It's armed. It says GS, glide slope, and approach mode is on. So we should, yeah, we are just starting to descend. The minimums for this approach and our aircraft in particular are 399. That's barometric. So we have to see something until we reach 399 feet. Otherwise we have to go around. Oh, I see lights. And now I can confirm that's the runway. Minimums, continue, autopilot off. It feels so smooth compared to the previous flights. It's funny that the ILS path and the PAPIs are not aligned. I'm not sure if it has something to do with the scenery that I have installed or it's anything else. Even though it's smooth, I'm getting some wind variation. I was getting pushed to the left over there. We have plenty of runway, more than 3000 meters. So I will delay our touchdown because our parking is on the other end of the runway. Oh, I bet with that one my passenger is still well asleep. We can let it roll down the runway. There's no traffic waiting for us. At least I hope. Let's make it out of the runway here. I think this is a nice spot. Parking brake on. Shut down. Well guys, the weather has changed dramatically, as you can see. This is Active Sky playing a prank on me. This was our first passenger flight and I can report that he's still alive. Going through therapy right now. And if you are still watching, I'll assume that's because you enjoyed the content. So give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. As always, leave your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, fly clever!